During our daughter's sweet 16, my husband raised his glass and said, "I'm taking her out of the country for her real education, and her passport is already in my briefcase." My husband Daniel stood at the head of our dining table with champagne in hand, while our daughter Chloe sat frozen in her pink dress, surrounded by 50 family members and friends. He smiled like he'd just announced a surprise vacation, instead of something that made my stomach drop through the floor. We leave Monday morning for Switzerland. She'll attend the boarding academy my family founded 3 generations ago. It's time she learns what it means to be a Whitmore. Our guests looked confused but started clapping politely because they thought this was part of the party entertainment. My sister Veronica stopped mid-bite and stared at me with wide eyes. Chloe's face had gone completely white and she gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles looked bloodless. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the hardwood. "What are you talking about? We never discussed this." Daniel's smile didn't falter. "I've handled everything. The enrollment is complete and the tuition is paid for 4 years. Her passport is in my briefcase and her flight is booked. This is what's best for her future." My mother reached over and grabbed my hand. Chloe looked at me with panic in her eyes and mouthed the word "mom" without making a sound. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else because nothing about it made sense. Daniel had never mentioned boarding school or Switzerland or taking Chloe anywhere without me. My father stood up from his seat and his voice carried across the room. "You can't just announce you're taking a child to another country without discussing it with her mother first. What kind of game is this?" Daniel set down his glass and pulled a folder from the briefcase sitting by his chair. "It's not a game, Richard. I have sole authority to make educational decisions for Chloe according to our custody agreement. Check paragraph 7 if you'd like." He slid papers across the table toward me and I grabbed them with shaking hands. The document looked official with legal letterhead and signatures at the bottom. I scanned the text and found paragraph 7, which stated that Daniel Whitmore had final decision-making authority regarding the minor child's education, medical care, and religious upbringing. I'd never seen this document before in my life. We'd never had a custody agreement because we were married and living together. Veronica leaned over my shoulder to read it. "This is dated 3 months ago. Did you sign this?" I shook my head because I definitely hadn't signed anything that gave Daniel sole authority over our daughter. "This isn't real. We don't have a custody agreement." Daniel reached for another paper in his folder. "We do now. Judge Carmichael approved it after our mediation session in August." I felt my face get hot. "What mediation session? I was never at any mediation." Chloe pushed back from the table and stood up with tears streaming down her face. "I'm not going to Switzerland. I have school here and my friends and the dance competition in November. You can't make me go." Daniel's expression hardened. "You're 16. You don't get to decide where you live or where you go to school. That's my responsibility as your father, and I'm exercising my legal rights." My brother-in-law Keith pulled out his phone and started typing. He was a criminal defense attorney, and I could see his jaw clenching as he read the documents I'd passed down the table. Veronica had her arm around Chloe, who was crying openly now. The party guests were completely silent, and several people had their phones out recording everything. My best friend Diana stood up from her seat. "This is insane. You're talking about kidnapping your own daughter." Daniel laughed like she'd said something amusing. "It's not kidnapping when you have legal custody and court approval. Everything here is completely legitimate. I've spent 3 months preparing for this and every detail is in order." He looked directly at me when he said it, and I saw something cold in his eyes that I'd never noticed before. "You can contest it if you want, but by the time you get a lawyer and file motions, we'll already be in Zurich. Swiss courts don't tend to send children back once they're enrolled in established institutions." Keith stood up and walked over to examine the papers himself. "These signatures look real, but something's off. Judge Carmichael retired in June. He's not hearing cases anymore." Daniel didn't miss a beat. "He signed this before his retirement became official. Check the date." Keith looked closer at the document. "The date says August 15th. Carmichael had his retirement party on August 3rd. I was there." The room got very quiet. Daniel's lawyer facade cracked just slightly. "Maybe you're misremembering the date of his party." Keith shook his head slowly. "No, it was my daughter's birthday weekend. We celebrated both events together. August 3rd, 2024. He pulled up something on his phone and turned it to show the table. "Here's the photo from that day. Judge Carmichael cutting a retirement cake with the date on it." My mother stood up and her voice was shaking. "You forged court documents. You forged a judge's signature to steal your own daughter." Daniel's face flushed red. "I didn't forge anything. My attorney handled the paperwork and assured me everything was legitimate. If there's an error in the dates, that's a clerical mistake, not fraud." Veronica had her phone out now calling someone. "I'm calling the police. This is attempted kidnapping with forged documents." Daniel grabbed his briefcase. "You're overreacting. This is a family matter, and it should be handled privately." My father moved to block the doorway before Daniel could leave. "You're not going anywhere until the police get here. You just admitted in front of 50 witnesses that you planned to take Chloe to another country using fake court orders." Daniel tried to push past him, but Keith stepped in to help block the exit. "Sit down, Daniel. You're already in enough trouble without adding assault to the charges." Daniel looked around the room at all the faces staring at him with disgust and shock. His carefully planned announcement had completely fallen apart in less than 10 minutes. He sat back down at the head of the table but kept his briefcase clutched against his chest. Chloe was sobbing into Veronica's shoulder and refusing to look at her father. Diana came over and put her hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I wasn't okay. My husband had just tried to kidnap our daughter using forged legal documents at her own birthday party. Nothing about this situation was anywhere close to okay. I don't understand why he would do this. We're not even separated. We've been fine. Diana squeezed my shoulder. You've been fine. He's apparently been planning this for months. The front door opened and 2 police officers walked in. Veronica must have told them it was an emergency because they came in fast looking for immediate danger. The older officer looked at the crowd of people standing around our dining room table and then at Daniel sitting with his briefcase. Someone called about attempted kidnapping with forged documents? Keith stepped forward and handed over the papers Daniel had presented. Daniel Whitmore just announced he's taking his daughter to Switzerland on Monday, using this custody agreement signed by a retired judge. The signature is dated 2 weeks after the judge's retirement party. We have photos proving Judge Carmichael wasn't signing anything on August 15th because he retired in early August. The officer examined the documents carefully while his partner took out a notebook and started writing. Daniel stood up. This is a misunderstanding. My lawyer prepared these documents and I trusted they were legitimate. If there's an error, it's his mistake, not mine. The officer looked at him. Where did you plan to take your daughter? Daniel hesitated. To a boarding school in Switzerland. It's a family institution and perfectly respectable. The officer nodded slowly. And when were you planning to leave? Daniel's voice got quieter. Monday morning. I have tickets for both of us on a direct flight to Zurich. The officer glanced at his partner. And does the child's mother have any knowledge of this plan? Everyone looked at me and I shook my head. I found out 5 minutes ago when he announced it at her birthday party. The officer put the documents in an evidence bag and looked at Daniel. I'm going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about these documents and your travel plans. We'll also need to speak with the attorney who allegedly prepared this paperwork. Daniel's face went pale. Am I being arrested? The officer's expression stayed neutral. Right now, we're just asking you to come in for questioning. But I'm also going to need that passport you mentioned, the one in your briefcase. Daniel clutched the briefcase tighter. That's my daughter's property. You can't just take it. The officer's voice got firmer. If you're planning to leave the country with a minor using questionable legal documents, then that passport is evidence in a potential kidnapping case. Hand over the briefcase, please. Daniel looked around the room like he was searching for someone to back him up, but every single person was staring at him with horror or anger. He slowly unzipped the briefcase and pulled out a navy blue passport. The officer took it and flipped through the pages. This passport belongs to Chloe Whitmore. When did you obtain this? I stepped forward. I keep our passports in the safe upstairs. He must have taken it without telling me. The officer looked at Daniel. Did you have permission to take this passport? Daniel's jaw tightened. She's my daughter. I don't need permission to access her documents. The officer exchanged glances with his partner. Actually, when you're planning to remove a minor from the country without the other parent's knowledge or consent, and you're using potentially forged court documents to justify it, then yes, you need permission. We're going to hold on to this passport as evidence. He handed it to his partner, who put it in another evidence bag. Daniel's lawyer persona had completely crumbled now, and he just looked trapped. I want to speak to my attorney before I answer any more questions. The officer nodded. That's your right. Let's head down to the station, and you can make that call from there. They escorted Daniel toward the door, and everyone watched in silence as he left his daughter's birthday party in the back of a police car. Chloe had stopped crying, but she looked completely shocked. My mother came over and hugged both of us. I can't believe he was actually going to do it. Take her to another country and just leave you here. I couldn't believe it either. 20 minutes ago, I'd been celebrating my daughter's 16th birthday. Now I was watching my husband get taken away by police for attempted kidnapping. Diana started ushering guests toward the door. I think we should probably end the party here. Chloe needs time with her family. People filed out quietly with awkward goodbyes and shocked expressions. After everyone left except my parents, Veronica, and Keith, we sat in the living room trying to process what had just happened. Keith had the forged custody documents spread out on the coffee table and was examining them with a lawyer's eye. These are good forgeries. The letterhead looks authentic and the formatting matches real court documents from this district. Someone with legal knowledge created these. Veronica was holding Chloe, who had finally stopped crying but looked exhausted. Why would he do this? What could he possibly gain from taking her to Switzerland? Keith looked up from the papers. Control, money, status, maybe all three. If the Whitmore family really does have a boarding school in Switzerland, then this might be about maintaining their legacy or their reputation. Rich families do strange things to preserve their image. My father paced by the window. But why now? Why announce it at her birthday party in front of everyone? If he really wanted to take her, why not just do it quietly? Keith shook his head. Because he thought these documents were bulletproof. He believed he had legitimate legal authority and wanted to make a public display of his power. He thought no one could stop him. I looked at Chloe, who was staring at the floor. Did your father say anything to you about this before tonight? Any hints about boarding school or moving to Switzerland? She shook her head slowly. He's been weird for a few months, asking me questions about what I wanted to do after high school and saying I needed to think bigger than state college. but he never mentioned Switzerland. My mother sat down next to me and took my hand. What about your marriage? Have things been okay between you two? I thought about the past few months and realized there had been signs I'd ignored. Daniel spending more time at his office, being vague about his schedule, taking phone calls in another room. We've been distant. I thought he was just stressed about work. Keith gathered up the documents and put them back in order. You're going to need a family law attorney first thing Monday morning. Even though these documents are fake, Daniel clearly has resources and he's willing to use them. You need someone who can protect your rights and Chloe's safety. Veronica pulled out her phone. I know someone. Angela Chen specializes in high-conflict custody cases. Let me see if she can meet with you tomorrow. I felt overwhelmed by how fast everything was moving. This morning, I'd been planning a birthday party. Tonight, I was preparing for a custody battle. What if he makes bail? What if he tries to take her anyway? Keith's expression turned serious. He won't get bail tonight. Tomorrow's Sunday, so he'll sit until Monday morning at the earliest. That gives us time to file emergency protective orders and get temporary custody arrangements in place. By the time he's out, there will be legal barriers preventing him from taking Chloe anywhere. Chloe finally spoke up. I don't want to see him, even with supervision or whatever. I don't want to be around someone who tried to kidnap me. I pulled her close and felt her trembling against me. You don't have to see him. We'll make sure you're safe. My father stopped pacing. What about his family? The Whitmores have money and connections. They might try to interfere or apply pressure. Keith nodded grimly. That's a real concern. If there really is a family boarding school in Switzerland, then this might be bigger than just Daniel acting alone. We need to find out who else knew about this plan. Veronica's phone rang and she stepped into the kitchen to answer it. When she came back, her expression was troubled. That was Angela. She can meet us tomorrow afternoon at her office. But she said something else. She looked up Daniel's family, and apparently the Whitmore Academy in Zurich is a real institution. It's been operating since 1925, and it caters to wealthy families who want their children educated in the European tradition. My mother's face went pale. So this wasn't just a desperate plan. This was an organized effort by his entire family. Keith looked at the documents again. If that's true, then someone in his family helped him forge these papers. Someone with legal knowledge and access to court letterhead. This is a conspiracy. The word hung in the air like poison. My husband hadn't just betrayed me and tried to kidnap our daughter. He'd done it with the help of his wealthy family, who apparently believed they had the right to take Chloe away from me and raise her according to their standards. That night, I couldn't sleep. Chloe was in bed with me because she was too scared to be alone. My parents were staying in the guest room and Veronica had crashed on the couch. I lay there in the dark thinking about the past 16 years. Daniel and I had met in college. He came from money but never flaunted it. We'd built what I thought was a good life together. He worked at his family's investment firm and I taught art at the community college. We had a house and friends and a daughter we both loved, or at least I thought we both loved her the same way. Now I was realizing that his love came with conditions and requirements. He didn't want Chloe to grow into her own person. He wanted her molded into a Whitmore. Around 3 in the morning, I finally drifted off but woke up to my phone ringing at 7. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? A woman's voice came through, polite but cold. Is this Mrs. Whitmore? I sat up carefully, trying not to wake Chloe. Yes. Who is this? The woman paused. My name is Catherine Whitmore. I'm Daniel's mother. I think we need to talk about what happened last night. I felt anger rise in my chest. Your son tried to kidnap my daughter using forged legal documents. I don't think we have anything to discuss until he's out of jail and facing charges. Catherine's voice stayed calm. I understand you're upset, but there's been a misunderstanding. Daniel was acting in Chloe's best interest. The Whitmore Academy is one of the finest educational institutions in Europe. She would have opportunities there that she'll never have in a small town going to public school. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway so I wouldn't wake Chloe. He was going to take her to another country without my permission using fake court orders. That's not acting in her best interest. That's kidnapping. Catherine sighed. The documents may have had some administrative errors, but Daniel's intentions were pure. He wants what's best for his daughter. Surely you can understand that as a mother. I felt my hands shaking with rage. What I understand is that your son committed fraud and attempted kidnapping. And you're calling me to justify it, which means you probably knew about his plan. Were you involved in this, Catherine? Did you help him forge those documents? There was a long silence on the other end. I think you're being very emotional right now, and we should discuss this when you've calmed down. The Whitmore family is prepared to offer you a very generous financial arrangement if you'll agree to let Chloe attend the academy. We're talking about her future. I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. You're trying to buy my daughter. You think you can commit crimes and then just pay me off to make it go away? Catherine's voice turned cold. We're offering you a chance to do what's right for Chloe without dragging this through the courts. Think carefully before you refuse. The Whitmore family has significant resources and excellent legal representation. If you fight us on this, it will be expensive and painful for everyone involved, especially for Chloe. I hung up on her. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Veronica came out of the living room looking concerned. Who was that? I told her about Catherine's call and the offer to pay me off. Veronica's face went red with anger. They're threatening you. That's witness intimidation. We need to tell the police about this call. Keith came downstairs still in yesterday's clothes. Tell the police about what? After I explained Catherine's call, Keith pulled out his phone and started recording. If she calls back, don't hang up. Keep her talking and record everything. Anything she says about paying you off or threatening legal action can be used as evidence that this was a coordinated family effort. My father came into the kitchen. The whole family is rotten. They think money gives them the right to do whatever they want. My mother was making coffee, but her hands were unsteady. What if they try to take Chloe anyway? What if they send someone to grab her off the street? Keith's expression turned serious. That's a legitimate concern. Until we get protective orders in place, Chloe shouldn't go anywhere alone. Someone needs to be with her at all times. Sunday afternoon, we met with Angela at her office downtown. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She listened to our entire story without interrupting and took detailed notes. When we finished, she looked at Chloe. Did your father ever hurt you physically or threaten you? Chloe shook her head. No, but he was always controlling. About my grades and my activities and who I spent time with. He said I needed to live up to the family name. Angela wrote something down. And the boarding school in Switzerland. Did he ever mention it before the party? Chloe thought about it. Once. Maybe 2 months ago. He said his mother wanted me to visit Zurich and see where the Whitmores came from. I said I didn't want to miss dance camp and he got really angry. He said I was wasting my potential on silly hobbies. Angela looked at me. What about the marriage? Any history of abuse or controlling behavior toward you? I felt uncomfortable talking about personal things with my daughter sitting there, but Angela needed to know. He controlled our finances. I have access to our joint account, but he made all the major decisions about money. He chose this house and our cars. He decided where we went on vacation. I thought I was being a supportive wife, but now I'm realizing I was just letting him control everything. Angela nodded like she'd heard this story before. Classic pattern. Financial control, social isolation, decision-making authority. It's all about power. She pulled out several forms and started filling them in. Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I'm filing an emergency petition for sole custody with supervised visitation only for Daniel. I'm also requesting a restraining order preventing him from contacting Chloe or coming within 500 feet of her. We'll include Catherine's phone call as evidence of witness intimidation and family conspiracy. Keith leaned forward. What about the forged documents? Can we use those in the custody case? Angela smiled grimly. Absolutely. Attempting to kidnap a child using forged court papers shows extremely poor judgment and willingness to break the law. No judge is going to grant him any kind of unsupervised access after this. Veronica had been quiet, but now she spoke up. What about his family? Catherine made it sound like they have unlimited resources to fight this. Angela didn't look concerned. Resources don't matter when the facts are this clear. Daniel committed multiple crimes in front of 50 witnesses and it's all documented. The Whitmores can hire the most expensive lawyers in the country, but they can't change what happened. Chloe had been staring at the floor, but now she looked up. What if they try to grab me? What if they send someone from Switzerland to kidnap me for real? Angela's expression softened. That won't happen. Once the protective orders are in place, anyone who attempts to take you against your will can be arrested immediately. And I'll make sure the court knows about Catherine's threatening phone call. That shows intent to continue the conspiracy. We left Angela's office with a stack of paperwork and a court date set for Monday afternoon. Keith drove us home and insisted on staying to help coordinate security. Daniel's family might try something desperate before the hearing tomorrow. We need to be smart about this. My father agreed to stay at our house. Veronica said she'd take the night shift sleeping on the couch. We set up a rotation so someone would always be awake and alert. That night, Catherine called again. This time I was ready. I put the phone on speaker with Keith and Veronica listening. Hello, Catherine. Her voice was strained. Have you reconsidered our offer? The Academy is willing to provide a full scholarship for Chloe along with travel expenses and a generous monthly stipend for you. Keith was recording everything on his phone. I kept my voice steady. No, I haven't reconsidered. What you're asking me to do is give up my daughter in exchange for money. That's not going to happen. Catherine's tone hardened. You're being very foolish. Daniel is going to be released tomorrow, and when he is, we'll file for legitimate custody through proper channels. The Whitmore family has relationships with judges throughout this state. You can't win this fight. I felt my anger spike but kept my voice calm. Is that a threat, Catherine? Are you telling me your family plans to bribe judges to take my daughter? There was silence. I'm simply stating facts. The Whitmore name carries weight in legal circles. Keith gestured for me to keep her talking. Tell me about the boarding school. How long have you been planning to send Chloe there? Catherine seemed to relax, thinking the conversation had shifted to safer ground. We've been discussing it for over a year. Daniel felt strongly that Chloe needed proper education and cultural refinement. The Academy has produced 3 generations of successful Whitmores. It's a family tradition. I pressed further. So this wasn't a sudden decision. You've been planning to take her for a year? Catherine caught herself. Planning to offer her the opportunity, yes. Not to take her. There's a difference. Keith was scribbling notes. And the custody documents Daniel used, where did those come from? Catherine's voice went sharp. I don't know what you're talking about. I pushed harder. The documents he tried to use were forgeries with a retired judge's signature. Someone with legal knowledge created those. Was it you, Catherine? Did you help your son forge court papers? Catherine was quiet for several long seconds. This conversation is over. Expect to hear from our attorneys. She hung up. Keith stopped the recording and smiled. That was perfect. She admitted they'd been planning this for over a year and she threatened you with judicial corruption. This recording is going straight to Angela and the police. Veronica looked relieved. So they can't claim this was a spontaneous mistake. They've been conspiring to take Chloe for months. I felt sick thinking about it. A year. They spent a year planning how to steal my daughter. And Monday morning arrived and I hadn't slept more than an hour. Chloe was exhausted and scared. Angela called at 8 to confirm our court hearing was set for 2 in the afternoon. Daniel made bail this morning. His family posted $100,000, but there's a temporary restraining order in place so he can't come near you or Chloe. I felt my stomach twist. He's out already? That was fast. Angela's voice was calm. Expected. He's not a flight risk according to the judge since we have his passport and Chloe's passport. But the restraining order is solid. If he violates it, he goes straight back to jail. Keith drove us to the courthouse at 1:30. There were reporters outside, which surprised me until Keith explained that attempted kidnapping cases involving wealthy families made good news stories. We pushed through them without commenting and met Angela inside. She looked confident in a navy suit with her briefcase under one arm. Are you ready? I nodded even though I didn't feel ready at all. We walked into the courtroom and I saw Daniel sitting at a table with 2 lawyers in expensive suits. His parents were in the back row looking stern and judgmental. Catherine caught my eye and her expression was pure ice. The judge came in and everyone stood. Judge Morrison was an older woman with reading glasses and gray hair. She looked at the case file and then at both tables. This is a hearing on emergency custody and restraining orders in the matter of Whitmore versus Whitmore. Let's begin. Angela stood and presented the case methodically. She showed the forged documents and explained how Judge Carmichael had been retired when they were allegedly signed. She played the video from the birthday party that someone had posted online showing Daniel's announcement. She presented Catherine's threatening phone calls with the recordings Keith had made. She showed the plane tickets and the boarding school enrollment papers. Every piece of evidence built on the last until the picture was undeniable. Daniel's lawyers tried to interrupt several times, but Judge Morrison shut them down. When Angela finished, the judge looked at Daniel. Is it true that you attempted to take your daughter to Switzerland using forged custody documents? Daniel's lead lawyer stood up. Your Honor, my client was misled by an unethical attorney who provided him with what he believed were legitimate legal documents. He had no knowledge they were forged. Judge Morrison looked skeptical. He had no knowledge that the judge who allegedly signed them had been retired for over a month? The lawyer faltered. That's correct, Your Honor. He trusted his legal counsel. Judge Morrison turned to Daniel directly. Mr. Whitmore, do you understand that forging court documents is a serious crime? And that attempting to remove a child from the country without the other parent's knowledge or consent is kidnapping? Daniel stood up slowly. Your Honor, I only wanted what was best for my daughter. The Whitmore Academy is one of the finest institutions in Europe. I believed I was acting within my rights as her father. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Your rights as a father don't include committing fraud and kidnapping. Even if you genuinely believed these documents were legitimate, the fact that you plan to leave the country without informing your daughter's mother shows a fundamental disregard for her parental rights. She looked at the papers in front of her. I'm granting the emergency petition. Mrs. Whitmore is awarded temporary sole custody. Mr. Whitmore's visitation is suspended pending a full custody hearing and the resolution of criminal charges. The restraining order is granted. Mr. Whitmore is not to come within 500 feet of his daughter or contact her in any way. Daniel's face went white. Your Honor, please. She's my daughter. I love her. Judge Morrison looked at him with something like pity. Then you should have thought about that before you tried to steal her. She banged her gavel and the hearing was over. Daniel's lawyers immediately started arguing for an appeal, but Judge Morrison was already leaving the bench. Catherine tried to approach me in the hallway, but Keith blocked her path. Stay away. You're named in the restraining order, too. Her face flushed red. You can't keep me from my granddaughter. Angela stepped forward. Actually, we can. And if you make any further contact, you'll be held in contempt. Security escorted Catherine away, and we left through a side entrance to avoid reporters. In the car, Chloe finally cried. Not scared tears like before, but relief. Is it really over? I held her hand. The emergency part is over. We still have a full custody hearing and he's facing criminal charges. But you're safe. He can't take you anywhere. Keith drove us home and my parents were waiting on the front porch. My mother hugged Chloe so tight I thought she might break. We heard. Full custody. That's wonderful. My father looked relieved but still worried. What about the criminal case? When does that start? Angela had followed us home to discuss next steps. The prosecutor's office will handle that separately. Based on the evidence, Daniel's looking at forgery charges, attempted kidnapping, and possibly conspiracy if they can prove his family was involved. He could face several years in prison. Over the next few weeks, the story exploded in local news and then got picked up nationally. Wealthy family tries to kidnap teenager using forged documents became a viral story. Reporters camped outside our house until we got a restraining order against them, too. The school offered Chloe counseling, which she accepted. She started sleeping through the night again after about a month. Daniel's preliminary hearing happened in early November. The prosecutor presented overwhelming evidence, including the forged documents, the videos from the birthday party, Catherine's recorded phone calls, and testimony from Keith about Judge Carmichael's retirement date. Daniel's lawyers tried to claim he'd been manipulated by a corrupt attorney, but the prosecutor showed emails between Daniel and Catherine discussing the boarding school plan dating back over a year. The emails proved this had been a long-term conspiracy. Catherine was arrested as an accessory and her husband had to bail her out. The Whitmore Academy in Switzerland released a statement saying they had no knowledge of any kidnapping plot and they'd rejected Chloe's enrollment application when they learned the custody documents were fake. Daniel's trial was set for February. Angela warned me it would be difficult because the Whitmores were fighting back with everything they had. They hired investigators who tried to dig up dirt on me. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. I was a community college art teacher who'd never even had a parking ticket. The investigators turned their attention to my family instead. They looked into my father's business records and my sister's finances, and even tried to question Chloe's friends at school about whether I was a good mother. Angela shut it all down with cease and desist letters, but it showed how desperate the Whitmores had become. In December, Catherine's lawyers approached Angela with a plea deal. If we agreed to drop the charges against Catherine, the family would pay for all legal fees and agree to stay away from Chloe permanently. Angela brought the offer to me, but I could tell she didn't like it. It's your decision, but if you take this deal, Catherine walks away without consequences. I thought about Catherine's threatening phone calls and her attempt to buy my daughter. No deal. She helped plan this and she should face charges. Angela smiled. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. The full custody hearing happened in January. Daniel's lawyers argued that he'd made a terrible mistake, but that he was still Chloe's father and deserved a relationship with her. They brought in psychologists who testified about the importance of father-daughter bonds. They showed photos of Daniel coaching Chloe's soccer team when she was 8 and helping her with homework and teaching her to ride a bike. They painted him as a loving father who'd gotten bad legal advice and made a catastrophic error in judgment. Angela destroyed that narrative in cross-examination. She asked the psychologists if loving fathers typically forge legal documents. She asked if healthy parent-child relationships involve kidnapping and deception. She brought Chloe to the stand. Chloe testified for 20 minutes about how her father had been controlling her entire life, how he chose her activities and her friends, and made her feel like nothing she did was good enough unless it fit his vision for her future, how he'd been cold and distant for months before the birthday party, how she'd been having nightmares since the attempted kidnapping, how she didn't feel safe around him anymore. Daniel's lawyers tried to soften her testimony, but Chloe was clear and consistent. She didn't want a relationship with her father. Not now, and maybe not ever. Judge Morrison took a week to decide. When we came back for the ruling, Daniel looked thinner and older. Catherine sat behind him, but they weren't speaking to each other. Apparently, the family had fractured under the pressure of criminal charges and legal fees. Judge Morrison read her decision from a prepared statement. This is one of the most troubling cases I've encountered in 30 years on the bench. Mr. Whitmore didn't just make a mistake. He engaged in a calculated conspiracy to remove his daughter from her mother's care using fraudulent legal documents. He recruited his extended family to help him commit these crimes. He showed no regard for his daughter's wishes or his wife's parental rights. He prioritized his family's legacy over his child's well-being. She looked directly at Daniel. You have destroyed any trust that existed between you and your daughter. You have traumatized her in ways that will take years to heal. You do not deserve custody or even supervised visitation at this time. She granted me permanent sole custody with no visitation for Daniel pending the outcome of his criminal trial. The decision could be revisited after he completed any prison sentence and underwent extensive psychological evaluation. Daniel's lawyers immediately filed an appeal, but Angela said it wouldn't succeed. The facts are too clear. No appellate court is going to overturn this. Daniel's criminal trial started in February and lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. The forged documents, the emails planning the kidnapping, Catherine's phone calls, testimony from 50 witnesses at the birthday party, financial records showing Daniel had spent thousands preparing for the move to Switzerland. Daniel took the stand in his own defense, which his lawyers later said was a mistake. He tried to explain that he'd only wanted the best for Chloe, that the Whitmore Academy represented opportunities she couldn't get anywhere else, that he'd trusted his lawyer when told the custody documents were legitimate. Under cross-examination, the prosecutor showed him emails where he'd specifically asked how to get emergency custody without his wife knowing. Emails where he'd discussed which judge might be sympathetic. Emails where he'd calculated how long it would take before I could challenge the custody order from another country. Every email contradicted his claim that he'd been misled. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: forgery, attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, and fraud. Catherine's trial came next, and she was convicted on conspiracy charges. She got 2 years in prison. Daniel got 5 years with possibility of parole after 3. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Morrison allowed Chloe to read a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium in a blue dress and read from a paper she'd written herself. My father taught me that love means control, that caring for someone means making their decisions for them, that family means sacrificing your own dreams for someone else's legacy. It took me 16 years to realize that none of that is true. Real love means respecting someone's choices, Real caring means supporting their goals even when they're different from yours. Real family means accepting people as they are, not trying to reshape them into who you want them to be. My father didn't try to kidnap me because he loved me. He tried to kidnap me because he loved the idea of what I could become if he controlled every aspect of my life. That's not love. That's ownership. And I'm not property. I'm a person. She folded her paper and looked at Daniel, who was crying at the defense table. I hope someday you understand what you did. I hope you learn that being a father means more than just biology and money and legacy. But even if you do, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. You didn't just try to take me away from my mother. You tried to take away my future, my choices, my voice. You tried to erase who I am and replace me with someone else. Someone who fit your family's image. I'm not that person, and I never will be. She walked back to sit with me and Angela. Daniel was led away in handcuffs, still crying. Catherine watched from the gallery with no expression at all. 2 years later, Chloe graduated high school with honors. She'd been accepted to 6 universities and chose the art program at a state school 3 hours away. Not because it was the most prestigious, but because it was what she wanted. She still saw a therapist once a month to work through the trauma. Some days were harder than others, but she was healing. Daniel sent letters from prison that I screened before deciding whether to give them to Chloe. Most of them were apologies and explanations that sounded hollow. Chloe read a few and then asked me to stop passing them along. I don't need his apologies. I need to move forward. Catherine was released after 18 months for good behavior. She tried to contact Chloe through social media, but Chloe blocked her on every platform. The Whitmore family had mostly collapsed under the weight of scandal. Daniel's father divorced Catherine. The investment firm lost clients. The boarding school in Switzerland quietly removed the Whitmore name from their literature. On the day we moved Chloe into her college dorm, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for not giving up. I hugged her tight. Always. That's what mothers do. She pulled back and smiled. Not all mothers, not all parents, but you did. And that's what matters. Watching her walk across campus toward her new life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just for her future, but for mine too. We'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. The scars would always be there, but they didn't define us anymore. We were free. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.